Okay. All right. So again, thank you for joining today. It's really going to be about automating the mundane necessary tasks associated with your data. And again, as Juliana said, my name is James Dumont. I am a technical specialist at MicroCAD. So here, we are scheduled for 30 minutes today. I might go a little bit over, but I'm going to try to keep as best as possible to that. The first thing I want to talk about is how do we incorporate iLogic inside of not just Vault, but Inventor to manage and control the metadata within your files. So for instance, when you're going to release your files, it's usually good practice to put some control. In this particular case, most of the time you're going to want either like description or make sure there's a part number, title, or even a custom user-defined property that needs to be filled in before you actually release a file. If you don't, you'll get a message something like this. Some properties do not match. And so, how do you fix this? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to Vault, and we'll just demonstrate this. So here's my drawing. When I change the state, and I want to go to a release state, and what I'm looking at right now is you'll see that my states are actually WIP, pre-released, and pre-release. We're going to talk about that in a second, going from concept to full production. So I get this out of the way here, and I hit OK to this. Because I have rules in place, I'm going to see messages like this. I can't do that. The reason why I can't is because the drawing file description is missing. So what I could do is I could edit the properties here, copy them from the part file up into the drawing. That's tedious. We're looking at automation. So if I open up this file, and if I look at the part file, see that it has title, it has description, it has a lot of information in here, but the drawing does not. Now, I have talked about this in the past. I always like to re-show this because I think it's worthwhile. So in here, I'd have to take the information and go in and enter it manually. Or, for those of you who don't know this, in the tools, document settings, drawing, we could actually copy the properties using this guy, which is also tedious. Every time the metadata in the part or the assembly changes, you have to redo this each time. So what I like doing is using iLogic. And I prefer to use external rules because I can open up a file that I did today or 6 months ago, and these rules will work. And I set my rules up, my external rules to be in a specific location. Right? So they're located somewhere.
Mute, please. There's a lot of background.
Someone might need to mute their, unless you're ready to speak. I would say mute it and then unmute it when you're ready to speak and interact. There is a lot of background noise. So my external rules are placed in a physical location, either the local drive or a network drive. It really doesn't matter. So once I have that in my iLogic, here's my external rules. Now, most of the time, as I said, you don't need to be a programmer. As long as you know how to Google, you know how to search, you can find what you need. And the code that I'm going to show you is something that I've done. I simply just copied it from the internet. So user group meeting, I'm going to create a new rule. I'll call this UG prop update. It doesn't matter what it's called. Oh, sorry. Copy and paste. So this is some code I found on the internet. This is just taking the properties from the model and updating the properties in the drawing. So let's save to this. So I just created an external rule. And then I'm not a programmer. I mean, I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm able to search and find what I'm looking for. I just type in Autodesk, iLogic, copy properties, and it's amazing what you'll find. Codes out there, copy and paste it. But what I want is I want this rule to happen every time I save my drawing. And we do that with what they call the event triggers. So right over here is the event triggers. Okay. In here, I'm going to set up, here's my rules right here, UG meeting, UG prop update. I want this to happen before I save, actually, sorry, so my drawings. I only want this to happen on drawings, not parts, not assemblies. So I want to be a little bit more specific here. So before I save and hit OK. Now, all I have to do is save this file. Properties are copied. Everything looks good. I can check this in. And in Vault, I can now release these files. I have all the metadata that I need. I'll change the state to be released. And off they go. All right. So I have shown this in the past, but again, it's worthwhile seeing it over and over just to make sure that you're comfortable with how to use and access it. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is inside of Vault is a copy design. It is probably the most used feature in Vault, with the exception of check in and check out, obviously. But we look at copy design. We look at a part file. So JD is an associate of mine at MicroCAD, so I'm going to use him as an example. So this particular file, it's got a lot of data right here. It's got a lot of data for drawn by, checked by, approved by. This file is released, it's approved. So you can see that it's got a little watermark right here, right over here, released to manufacturing. So this file's it's complete. If I'm going to copy it, it's basically a brand new file. So some of you have a lot of these signature fields in your title block. Not everyone uses them. So we have the ability, using the copy design, to just clear those fields. So if you're not familiar with that, we simply go into the part file, we copy design. Now what I like to do is I'll simply just copy it first. I'm going to copy it to the same folder that I'm in, and I'll change my scheme to be sequential. Now we have this rule set right over here, this default rule set right here. Now that doesn't do much other than just copy the file and keep the drawings associated to it. We have the ability to define a new rule set. So I can take the default and I can copy it, and I can create a new rule. And then if I edit this right here, I can do all kinds of things. So for the sake of time, I have one already done, this MTC rule. I'll edit this. And in here, the part number is mapped to the file name, the category name, Vault Professional, I'm resetting that. The author, it's me, it's mapped to the user who's doing the copy. And all the other check by and the signature fields are set to blank, and the date file created is set to the date that I'm copying it. So when I'm doing this copy, I just drop this down and do MTC rule. And I could also make that my default rule. But what's nice about this, if I create this rule set, as soon as I do this, once JD logs into the Vault, into the system, he has access to these rules. These are server-based, starting with Vault 2021. So I don't have to copy these between each user. I create it, I do it, we all have access to it. I execute. I'll close this. The file is copied. Right, everything looks good. I don't have the PDF yet, so I'm going to actually bring up my job processor. And resume it. So Vault Professional does rely on the job processor to process the files, to create the PDFs and all the extraneous files that it's working with. Now, the only thing I did was I created the files. The files are set to WIP pre-released. I now need to change them to be pre-released. That's the trigger that actually creates the PDF file and anything else that I might need. Back to here. And it's running those jobs. So my job processor, like most of my customers, it's on a different computer, separate. So I have a computer off in another room. I remote it into it so I can access it dynamically. So it's creating that. And we are live. If you have any questions as I'm moving through the topics, feel free. This is meant to be as interactive as possible. So when I look at the PDF file, right, drawn by is me. All the signature fields are cleared out. And as I'm going to show later on and throughout this presentation, each stage that I move through, I'm going to have different things that can be automatic as far as filling in these properties. The other thing is, take a look at this PDF file that gets created. It's actually got a watermark. So if Diana or JD is looking at this through the web client and look at this file, they'll know immediately this is pre-released. You know, do not bring this to production. It's still in process. So we have the ability, and we're going to talk about that shortly, as far as how do we create these watermarks right on the PDF files. Okay. So that is the copy design. I need to keep up with the PowerPoint. There we go. I'm just showing you some of that. Now, starting with Vault 2024, what I found, it's very common for companies when they create a project, they like to have the same folder structure. Maybe it's assemblies, components, and drawings. So when they create a new job, they might want to create those folders to begin with. And that's tedious. They have to right-click, new folder, right-click, new folder. So with 24, this has been automated. So if I look at this particular folder, I have 3 subfolders, and they do have files in it, but it doesn't matter. If I copy the folder, this is going to copy just the structure. It's not going to copy the files within it. It's also going to create the folder structure on the local workspace. It's going to create the subfolders wherever I place this, and I can navigate. Right now it's going to be in the home designs folder, but I can put it anywhere. So if I go over to, let's say, this folder right here, that's where the structure will be created, and I'm going to call this 102. It's done. Here it is here, and there's my structure. So the ability to create the folder structure quickly, and also if I look at my local drive, it creates the subfolders here as well. So when you're creating new files and saving it, the structure is already there. So you don't have to go to Vault and do a get. Again, it's about automating these manual steps. Okay. All right, so let's get back to the presentation. That's the structure. All right, so this is a big topic. Most people have run into these non-tip versions if you're running Vault Professional and you've been changing the state to be released. It's a terrible name. It's one of the most common phone calls that we get in Vault are these non-tip versions. And, excuse me, basically all it means is if JD and I are working on a project and I release files, and the job processor, maybe it's set for 10 or 15 minutes. So it could take up to 15 minutes to process the jobs. If JD is unaware and he goes and tries to change the life cycle of a file before it's processed, before my release was done, and he goes in there and he changes it, his will get finished, his will get processed, his PDF will get created, mine will not. I'll get the non-tip version. And how this works is just like this. So right now, if I go here, these files are pre-released. This is good. But if I take these files, actually, I'll just change the state of this to be WIP. So I would do that. I would open the file, I would make my edits, I would change it, and I would check it back in. Once it's finished, I would change the state back to be pre-released. When that happens, the job's in the queue to be processed. Again, if JD is unaware of this, he might go and he needs to change this file. It's pre-released. He'll change it to WIP and make his changes, and then he'll release it. So his job goes in the queue. If that happens before it's published, we get these non-tip versions. So what we want to do is have the ability to let the system do this for us. So the first solution is before I change a state, me, JD, anyone's got to go into the system, into the job queue, and see if the file's in there. It's not a realistic solution. Nobody does this. What we need is some control. So if I change the state of this and I go to WIP, I should get a message like this. You can't do that because the job is in the active queue. So now we're getting into the aspect of this automation where we're relying on third party. Close this. And I'm going to say no. So the best solution is we use coolOrnage and Power Jobs and Power Jobs Client. When you get this message, it's the Power Event is actually stopping you from doing that. It looks at things that you would have to do manually. And that's about automation. Anything that you would have to do manually, any picks and clicks or manipulation of files or states or whatever it might be, anything like that typically can be automated and programmed. And so with this, it's a matter of installing the Power Jobs client. It's got default preset scripts, and that you really don't have to do anything other than just install it, launch Vault, and it's up and running. And this prevents you from doing that. So this is kind of what the script looks like. And I don't want people to get too nervous about this. This is a script that's provided. And you can see over here, this is doing everything it needs to do. It simply looks at the job queue. It looks to see if the file that you're processing is in there. And then you get this nice little message. Please wait until the following jobs are processed. That's it. I didn't do anything with this script. I just took it and used it as is. Not a programmer. I'm just installing it. And coolOrnage, they're developers. They write programs and scripts for us. There's no fancy installs. There's no fancy getting into .NET. I simply installed the client. These scripts are already part of it, and I'm good to go. All right. Now, switching topics, we're going to get into updating properties. One of the things I would like to do is if I change this file from, you saw in the copy design, if I go from released to, oh, I'm sorry, if I copy design, it clears all my signature fields. And it also resets the drawn by and the drawn by date. If I'm taking a file that's released and I need to make an edit to it, I'm going to go to WIP. I don't want to change the drawn by and the drawn by date, but I do want to clear the signature fields. And also, if I go from for review to release, so if JD does that, it should put his signature and the date that he does that in the sign off fields. So these are updating the properties. And again, this is using the coolOrnage. It's using Power Events to do that for us. So we look at that. We have these events that get, again, this is out of the box. I installed it. These are events that automatically register with Vault. And as soon as you change a lifecycle state, that's an event. Now, you have pre and post events. It all depends on the permissions of the lifecycle. If a file is released, the files are read-only. I can't change anything. So that would be a post event that would happen. So when I go from release to WIP, it's read-writable, so I can make my changes then. If I go from WIP to released, WIP is writable, released isn't, so the information or the properties would update before the actual state executes. And this is, again, out of the box code, and the only thing I did is I just, excuse me, is I just added some parameters so that I could use my properties, which might be different from JD's properties or anyone else that's on the system. We have people from industrial sales and from Relex. Their properties might vary slightly. So I adjusted it by using parameters to make it very portable, and it looks something like this. Over here on my variables, like for instance, if it's release state, this is the state of my lifecycle defines it as released to MFG. That's my state name. If I give this script to industrial sales, they simply have to just change their state names to match. All of the code below it all still works. So you can see it over here, release state name, I have it over here. It's just a variable. And all I'm going to do is make my changes up here, and all the code just runs. The fields that I want to edit, I just created variables for those and plug them in. So when I go from release to WIP, that is a post action, and it just clears the fields. So how that works, right now, these are released. And if I look at my PDF file, I have my values. But if I take this file and I change the state to work in progress, you can see a little hesitation, then the screen is going to refresh. So the revision went to B. Oh, I forgot to get I didn't do the children. Let me get this guy, change state. I can't talk and work at the same time. It's terrible. All right. So if I were to look at this file, because I went from release to WIP, it doesn't create a visualization file, but if I just hit update, it'll do it for me, just so I don't have to open it inside of Inventor and take a look at it. But we could also look at the user-defined properties inside of the panel over here. They're clear. So this is something I noticed preparing for today's webinar, is sometimes the view takes a little while and I'm not sure what's going on. I just recently installed 2024.2. What I do is I click off of it, click on it, and then it's immediate. So I'm not sure what's going on, but you'll notice that all the fields are cleared. And that was the lifecycle state that did that. That's it. All right, that's that. All right, now this is the biggie, is concept to production. This has been a highly requested feature. Please don't laugh at my flow chart. I'm not the greatest at doing flow charts. I'm a solid modeler, not a flow charter. So we'll get through this. But basically, when you saw some of my life cycle states, you saw a WIP pre-release like this, right? Pre-release. Once it goes to pre-release, I'm synchronizing the properties and creating the PDF with the watermark pre-release. If I go back to WIP pre-release, it bumps the rev and it starts over again. The biggest problem is when you go from concept to production is that manual revision change. I got to go from numeric to alpha or alpha to numeric. I got to change, excuse me, on the revisions manually. So we're trying to find a way to automate that. So by changing the state to send to release, that's all I have to do now. The system will look at that. It'll automatically, and what I'd like to do is I change the category, I change the lifecycle definition, I change the state, and I change the revision. Because those are all things I could do manually, I could program those using the Power Jobs, and it did it for me. So for instance, if we look at this file, it's pre-released, and I don't show the rev, but it's actually rev 1. Here you go, it's rev 1. And it's pre-released. Oops, back up a little bit. There we go. So what's happening is when I change the state to be sent to manufacturing, a job gets queued to run. And what it does, it changes the revision definition, it changes the revision, it changes the status, it does everything for me dynamically. And we'll take a look at how that works. So this file, when I create brand new files and I check them in, they're automatically categorized as pre-released, right over here, pre-released. Once I switch it from send to manufacturing, that's going to change, the revision is going to change, and the life cycle is going to change. So the first thing I'm going to do here is change the state from WIP to pre-release. As long as I meet all the conditions, descriptions filled in, all the necessary properties, I can actually do that. So while it goes into pre-release, the files are locked. You can't edit them. You can't check them out. And it goes into be processed. I'm going to run it. So this is going to create all the necessary information. It's going to create the PDF files. It's going to create all the visualization files that I need. And this will switch. Let's do a refresh. I'll have my PDF file still running. There we go. So here's my PDF. My properties are all in there, and I can define what properties I want to make sure they match. The rev is in here, the categories in here, everything is good. As soon as I
have a question, sorry.
Sure, go right ahead.
Can I go? Okay. If you have a revision block on your drawing, will that be updated as well?
Hold on, I'm getting to it. Yes, and I got to show something with in regards to the change order, so it's pretty slick. But yes, it can.
Okay. Well,
Yep.
keep
So,
going.
yeah, thanks. So in here, you can see that it's pre-released. Here's my PDF, and my PDF is pre-released, Rev 1. So if I needed to make another change as far as concept-wise, I would go from pre-release to WIP pre-release and go to Rev 2, and then Rev 3 and Rev 4. But once I'm ready to go to full production, only thing I have to do is change the state to send to release. That's it. Just bring this down a little bit. Oh, I got jobs in the queue. Hang on a second. It did exactly what I wanted to do. There was a revision title block was stuck in there. Let me just remove that. All right. Change my state. Send to manufacturing. I hit OK. The state changes. I don't have to do anything else other than wait between, up to 10 minutes for the job process to work. But I don't want to wait. So pause, resume. It does everything for me. Everything I would do manually, it does it for me. And it's about finished. All right. Do my refresh. My states change to released. The categories change to released. The PDF is updated. The PDF watermark is updated. The rev is updated. Only thing I have to do is change the state. And that's it. So it's not complicated. I took the default code right there. It goes to send to released. Updates the title block. And for the watermark, again, it's built in from coolOrnage. I simply downloaded the script, copied it into the folder, and in here I can change any aspect of the watermark. Why was mine orange? Why was it not translucent? Where was it located? You control that. You make any changes you want just by making a few little edits right here. That's that. All right, so now we'll get into the change order. So for those of you who don't know, Vault Professional has an excellent change order control system. You assign files to the change order, or if you're using the item master, you assign items to the change order, and then you simply execute and process the files. So one of the biggest questions that we get is we use a change order. It creates a change order number, right? How do we get that number into the Rev history box in the drawing? So that's a manual process right now. You have to open the file, edit, type it in. So that's kind of painful. We have the ability now that we can capture this information. Because if we look at, right, like this here, we want to be able to get that ECO number inside of the Rev history. We want to get who approved it, like who released it. We want to get that information in there as well automatically. So what we can actually do here, if we look at Vault, we can see very clearly that's controlled and that's controlled by a change order, those two files. Because I know that, I can capture that from the script. So right now, this is released to manufacturing. It's controlled by a change order. So what I would do is, again, for time, I'm not going to go to the change order. I'm allowing myself to make the change of the state, not inside of the change order. I'm going to change the state to be WIP. So now I'm in a normal process, work in progress. Resetting the properties, it's doing all the automation in the background, right? It's in WIP. So what I did was, in my script, I simply created a user-defined property called ECO number. It's just a number, and I just mapped it to the files. That's all I did. And then in Vault, I just put it into the description so that when the revision history gets updated, it just takes the information from the ECO number and displays it in the description field. But I need to get the ECO number into that property. And that's done right here. So just by going from release to WIP, right over here. Now, this script is out of the box by coolOrnage. The only thing I added is what's in the red rectangle. Now, the information I needed, because I'm not a programmer, I Google searched to find what I needed and just placed it. So I can tell that the file, if it's controlled by a change order, that's just Boolean, yes or no. If it's controlled by a change order, oh, sorry. I'm just using this new tool for the first time. If it's controlled by a change order, this just gets the information of that, and then it captures the number and then updates the iProperty. That's it, 3 lines of code, and it takes the ECO number and it fills in the ECO number property. That's it. Then if I go from release to WIP and it's not controlled by a change order, I just clear the field out so there's no change order in there, and you can fill it out manually yourself. So now I go back to here, change my state, change this to for review. And because the way that I configure this, it's got to go from WIP to for review and then for review to be released. You don't need to do that. I'm just doing that just for the sake of demonstration purposes. And I go from release to manufactured. It's going to change the state. Right, you see that the files rev R, the PDF rev Q. It goes to the job queue to be processed. But if I look over here, look at the ECO number, 29. It fills it in for me. Then all I have to do is wait for the file to be processed, and it's in my rev history box. Okay, move it here, refresh. PDF has been updated. There it is. ECO number automatically put in there for me. I didn't have to do it. We're always looking about automation. We have to do this, but how do we do it quickly? So now I'm just going to go to the change order. And I should close this out for the next time I show this so that I don't have the same change order in there. It's going to respond, submit it, and then close it. There. Okay. That's that. That's the ECO number. What do you think? Pretty good? Can't see everyone. I'm hoping to see a lot of thumbs up. All right. Power events, that's where a lot of the magic happens as far as when a life cycle changes. You can do all kinds of things. If something goes from release to obsolete, that might trigger an email, and maybe that goes to quality control, right? Or maybe sales, so that they know that something's going on with this particular file. So if you can think it, we can do it. It's just a matter of what do you want to control and how much automation do you want to get into. So what I'm showing you is just a tip of the iceberg. You can do much more. Now, Power Jobs It has some overlaps with Vault Professional itself. I'm showing you Vault with file management, not item master. Everything I'm showing you excuse me, is doable with the item master. And that's one of the advantages of using PowerJobs, is that Vault out of the box only works with file management, not item master. You can't create PDFs, right? You can't do DXF and STPs. That's strictly file management. PowerJobs has been able to do that for years, and we can do the same thing that Vault can do, but a lot more. Now, anything that's gray, it's also provided with PowerJobs. It's just not out of the box. You just have to go to their website and download the files, the scripts, and just edit them and tweak them, and you're off and running. Like the watermark, that wasn't something that came out of the box. I went to their GitHub, downloaded the script. They told me where to copy it, and I have watermarks. It's that simple to do. Non-programmers, you might need a little assistance at the beginning. We have dozens of users that have PowerJobs, and once we configure it and get them up and running, they're able to do minor tweaks on their own without even contacting us. So we want to get people to be self-sufficient, not always relying on us to do the programming. All right. Excuse me. And the last thing I want to get into is what they call power settings. So what happens is when you create and customize Vault, everything focuses around transitions and security. If I go from WIP pre-release to release, something has to happen. If I go from full review to release, something has to happen. Quick change to release, something has to happen. So you have to modify the transition to each one of those transitions. So if you have a custom script that has to run, you got to go to each transition and make sure that script is put in there. It's not terrible, but it can be a little tedious, and you can forget a transition. Like someone was in quick change, they went to be released, there's no PDFs. How come? Because you forgot to add that transition. What's nice about the power settings is we can actually do that directly in Vault without having to get into the transitions. And what's nice about this, right over here, any file that gets set to be pre-released, no matter what state it's coming from, is going to get processed. If I'm going from WIP, quick change, or full review to full release, it's going to get processed. I only have to do one selection versus everything. For instance, so here's an example, right? We can create, when you go from, right, WIP to released, it's going to create all these files. Now it's going to create a flat pattern DXF. So that means if you have an assembly with 50 files, they're all going to get queued. But if you only have 3 sheet metal parts, eventually all 50 get processed, but only 3 DXFs get created. But the system's got to look at every file to determine if it's a sheet metal part. What we can do with the power settings is, instead of sending 50 files to be the queue or to the queue, if they're sheet metal, we only send 3. And we can do that by using built-in settings. This is Vault, this is Inventor, this is nothing new. I created this doc type name parameter or property, and I simply mapped it to the internal doc subtype name. Autodesk has these wonderful names. But basically what that does for us, if I look at this part right here, which is sheet metal, doc type name is sheet metal. So I know that it's sheet metal. This file is not sheet metal. It's just modeling. A drawing is not sheet metal. It's a drawing layout. So you have the ability to now to be a little bit smarter with your settings. So when I go into the power settings, and I have, these are the scripts that I run. I'm going to create DXF from a sheet metal part. I would like that to run only if the file is an IPT and only if the doc type name is sheet metal. And then I'll run that only when it goes to being released. That's it. The only time I need that to run, and I'll apply. The next one is a step. I don't want steps from IAMs. I only want steps from IPT files, so I can filter just an IPT file. And I'll edit this, and same thing. That's all I have to do. I have the scripts predefined. I took them out of the box. They're dynamic. And what I really like about this in the job settings, when you create PDF files, when you create step or DXFs, they can go in the vault or they can go external. You don't have to get really crazy with configuring this. So add step to vault, yes or no. And then where do you want to go? So if I'm going to do, if I'm going to go to the network, let's see here, step vault folder, step network folder. If I fill this in, that's the folder that's going to be located. And that's where it's going to go. And that's all I have to do. I do everything in the power settings. So now that I've configured that, let me minimize this. So this assembly right here, it's got a few parts, it's got some drawings. It's already set for WIP. When I change my state for review, and now I'll change the state to be full release manufacturing. The job is going to be sent to the queue. There's only one sheet metal part, so only one file gets sent to the queue. So the job queue does less work. The files get processed faster, and you get access to the documents, and it's much more, expeditious to get that. So let's come over to here, and just run this, and resume. So it's doing everything I need. It's going to create the PDF. It's going to create the DXF. It's going to create the STPs. I can even get STLs. I can create DXFs from drawings. It all depends what you want to do and what you want to configure. So it's creating PDFs. Sheet metal DXF. There's only one. And the step file, there's 3. So for the sake of time, I'm using just small part files and small assemblies, but it doesn't matter how large they are. If I do a top level assembly of 500 components, they'll all get processed. They'll automatically switch from concept to production. Everything that we specify gets executed dynamically. Here's my refresh. And I look at this IPT file right here. And I look at the uses, my attachments. I got one DXF and one STP. I look at this file, one STP. Very intelligent, less processing, more done. That's that. And all over. So are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Jim, for that wonderful presentation. And yeah, do we have any questions? I would like to, in the meantime, remind you all that we have coming up next on December 21st, PDF Perfection, Bluebeam Editing Supremacy at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So yeah, don't forget to be checking the MicroCAD website for you to register. And also to remind you all that if you want to learn any of these topics in detail, you can always take a custom training with Jim or someone else on our team. And and yeah, let's give it a minute or two for people to come up with the questions. If they have
Thanks
any.
for all the thumbs up. I appreciate that. I think this is good content. These are questions that I get on a regular basis with my Vault customers. And it took me a little bit. Finally found some solutions. And it all has to do with right here. If you can think it, it can do it. It's just a matter of finding the code, searching for whatever you might need, and then just plugging it in. So you don't have to be this full-fledged programmer to get this automation.
Can you customize hi Jim. Can
Hey.
you customize the watermarks?
Absolutely. I didn't mention that. So on my watermarks, I was just using the state, but I could do the state, the date, and the user. It's the watermark. It's all customizable. Same with the ECO number and the title block. I could do C ECO number or check ECO number. So you could do anything you want. You can customize the text.
You can change height, font, density, or opaqueness.
Yeah, opacity they call it. So I had 100%. So you can make it translucent, so you can actually see information through it. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So a lot to take in.
There is. Now, this also works with the item master. I'm starting to develop some scripts for that. Right now, 99% of our customers are file management. So, but everything I'm doing does work with the item master. And so I'm starting to develop those scripts. So we'll have those available as well.
Okay, so any more questions before we go?
All right. Well, I thank everyone for their
Sorry,
participation.
this has been recorded, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you will get the on-demand recording.
Okay.
Sure. Okay, so thank you so much all for attending. We appreciate it. We hope you found it useful and valuable, because that was the goal. I would like to thank Jim. Thank you so much. People loves you and loves watching you do your thing. And yeah, please let us know if there's anything else you would like to you would like us to cover next webinar with Jim.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.